Hello and welcome to CareerWise, the show that's constantly scanning the horizon on behalf of hard-working teachers everywhere. This week we look at provision for teachers with disabilities in schools, whether there's support or not, and we take a look at career development opportunities. We travel to the village of Ridgewell in Essex to meet a head teacher keen to learn more about the latest disability legislation.
When there's new legislation, you think it's going to impact on us a lot and it's going to mean lots of extra work, and I'm reassured that it's just building on what people have done already.
To discuss how the recent policy changes will be affecting your school, we're joined in the studio by Richard Reeser from the Disability Equality in Education charity and Catherine Casserly, Senior Legislation Advisor at the Disability Rights Commission. Then we visit partially sighted teaching assistant Henry Holmes at an extraordinary outward bound centre on the Isle of Wight.
As someone who has a visual impairment, I think the children do notice that, but I think in the end it's the only way for people to be aware of disability is for people to work together.
The Disability Equality Duty came into force in December 2006. The aim was to ensure that all public authorities strive to make things equal for disabled people. Schools are expected to keep up with updates through their LEA. So CareerWise loaded up the Sharabang and headed into deepest Essex to meet a head teacher who believes that his disability benefits his children.
We're going to be giving out the certificates for the art competition, okay? First prize was Rebecca. So Rebecca, do you want to come out? In the office I keep about 5 or 6 posters up high, so that if I'm talking to somebody about dyslexia and so on, there's Lord Rogers up there, who's a famous architect. There is Benjamin Zephaniah, who's a poet. You've got Albert Einstein, who lists his job as being genius. I found that being dyslexic has actually improved my teaching to a certain extent, because, for instance, when I'm writing up on the board and I come across a word that I'm not sure whether I've spelt it correctly or not, I use one of the techniques that I teach the children to use. So, for instance, I might underline it, or I might just put the first few letters of it and then leave the rest a space blank, and then I go back and check it later on. I underlined my mistake to make sure I came back and sorted it out in a minute. People stopped and stared at me. What did I do?
You didn't write the T.
Yeah, I missed the T out.
A team of disability advisors from Essex County Council are arriving to advise Andy on the recent policy changes.
When people who really know their stuff come and visit you, part of you is slightly apprehensive in case there are things, obvious things that you've missed, or something they're going to pick up on and you've done something wrong.
Today we were specifically looking at giving Andy some advice around, I think particularly his accessibility within the school, and also meeting the requirements of the new Disability Equality Scheme.
The thing that I wasn't clear about, that I'm not clear about at the moment, is what the difference with the new legislation is compared to the old legislation.
Leslie Ann and the team suggested checking DFES guidelines, considering accessibility in the school, and promoting the employment of disabled teachers.
It's just nice to walk around the school and see the sorts of things that Andy has been putting in place already, and where he can build on to improve his accessibility plan and include those issues in his Disability Equality Scheme.
But down here, on our accessibility plan, we've got we're going to be putting in a pathway from the corner of the hard area.
The new duty which came into place last year was building on the Disability Discrimination Act and the duties within that schools have a responsibility to actively promote disability within their community.
It's really interesting to pick up their thoughts and ideas. Like, for instance, I hadn't considered hearing loops for over in the new buildings here, because none of our children need them. But actually, I want the buildings to be used by the community in the evenings, and those sorts of things are going to be very important.
The thing that impressed me most was the school's attitude towards Andy's disability. and in itself that is promoting a positive image of disability.
Excellent. The main thing that I'm taking away from today is that we've done a lot of good work already, and that it's not going to be as difficult as I think you're always worried. When there's new legislation, you think it's going to impact on us a lot and it's going to mean lots of extra work, and I'm reassured that it's just building on what people have done already.
Well, Andy clearly got a lot out of his visit from the LEA, and to discuss the issues further, you could say the pros and cons, were joined in the CareerWise studio by Catherine Casserly and Richard Reeser. So Catherine, we saw in the film there that Andy obviously found a lot of positive things, but are all head teachers extremely sure of how to progress with DED?
I think there's probably a range of awareness. I think the awareness is increasing, and certainly there are lots of resources out there to help them with understanding what the duty is all about. And really it's quite straightforward in a way. I mean, what it's about is proactively addressing disability equality, not just reacting to individual problems as they arise, but taking action in advance and really putting disability at the heart of what schools do.
So what are those changes in policy then that people should be aware of?
And I think Andy there talked about the posters that he had on the wall of different public figures who are dyslexic, and it's very important that the profile of disabled people is raised and that positive role models are provided. So there are some very basic things you can do around that. They also need to look at eliminating discrimination, and that means looking at their practices and policies in relation to employment, for example. How much support do they provide for disabled teachers or people applying for jobs at the school, and also obviously pupils as well. So there's a range of different things that they need to look at.
Posters and policies are one thing, but it's part of the problem that particularly teachers aren't getting training in disability awareness by people with disabilities.
I think that is one of the problems, but there are a lot of disabled equality trainers around who can provide inset day training for schools. I've done a lot of it. We have a whole network of people who can do it, and it does make a difference. It is about changing hearts and minds. It's not just about complying with the legislation. It's about actually bringing it into your practice, into your thinking. And there is a lot of resource out there for schools who want to take advantage of it.
Richard, are there really lots of schools actively engaged in implementing these changes?
There has been, for many years in schools, the teaching profession and associated professions, an idea that if you're disabled that you should be got rid of out of the profession, and that's still the normal reaction of most head teachers. If someone can't do the job without adjustment, then maybe they should think about early retirement. And of course this
sounds like a rather harsh judgment. Surely that's not the case.
I'm afraid it is the case. Another role I have is as a NUT Disability Committee, and we have endless cases coming up.
Catherine, do you acknowledge that there's a weight of evidence to show that the policies aren't making a practical difference to teachers and pupils with disabilities, as Richard paints the picture?
I think Richard's right, there is a long way to go. I mean, undoubtedly there are some positive stories, and I think Andy is just one of those examples, and there are other examples around like that. There is a long way to go, but hopefully we will get there, and certainly there's, particularly for primary schools who don't have to have their disability equality schemes in place until December this year, there is time for them to get this right.
Is part of the problem here that we're not addressing the individual needs of people with disabilities? The gamut runs from someone with dyslexia through to someone with severe physical disabilities?
Well, of course, the definition is very broad. It covers probably over 22% of the population, maybe up to 20% in schools. Disability is a rights concept. It's to prevent discrimination, and therefore it doesn't matter what the particular impairment is in the sense of discrimination. It certainly matters in terms of getting the right support, but that's a different issue.
Catherine, I mean, realistically, is there resistance out there amongst schools to DED, a little bit like there has been with the Race Discrimination Act in the past?
I think a lot of it's lack of awareness and lack of understanding, and perhaps a fear that this is a very big thing and it's going to add to people's workload, where in fact it won't. I mean, if schools are already doing what they should be doing under the DDA, their accessibility plans, making sure that they make reasonable adjustments both for pupils and for their staff, then really it's about building on that, and they shouldn't find it a huge leap to make sure that they build disability into everything they do.
I'm looking to the day when we remove all the barriers for disabled learners in our schools to see much improved achievement for all of them, and that's really what this is about, that they actually improve what they achieve at school so their life chances are improved out in society, because we still have a situation where half of all disabled adults are not working and never have done.
Well, listen, thanks very much indeed to both of you for coming in today. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Richard. Now, Henry Holmes is a teaching assistant. He was recently awarded higher level status for his work with children with special education needs. So the CareerWise team blew a bit of air into the dinghy and headed off to the Isle of Wight to join Henry on a special day out.
Before I'd worked in business, and then I moved across to teaching because I was interested in seeing what it was like now for disabled people to go to a mainstream school. I was born with cataracts, but what I see is what I've always seen, so my sight hasn't changed.
Henry has taken the children on a trip to Kingswood Recreation Centre on the Isle of Wight, which allows him and the children a time for fun and reflection.
I decided to try and train on the graduate teacher programme in mainstream teaching. I could cope with the planning, the teaching and the assessment. And then I was teaching all day for 4 days. And at that point I realised that I hadn't got systems in place to help me through that period. At that point I had to stop the programme because I realised that however hard I tried, I wasn't actually set up with the right equipment, with the right support. But I was able to get a job at West Wimbledon Primary School, where we have a special treetops unit for children with autism.
Back at Henry's school, West Wimbledon Primary, Deputy Head Teacher Emma Murray recalls Henry's interview.
It's about the person behind the disability, and when we recruited Henry, it really wasn't a part of the recruitment process. It was about Henry's experience, his qualification, his need and want for more professional development, which was for us was very, very important. I think Henry is particularly good at working with special needs children because he's very much able to relate it to his own experience.
What I'd like to see is more information available for disabled people to make their choices.
Henry is very keen for professional development, and he's actually the first person from our school to go through the High Learning Teaching Assistant course, and we're very proud of him for doing that.
As someone who has a visual impairment, I think the children do notice that, but I think in the end it's the only way for people to be aware of disability is for people to work together.
That's all we have for you in this week's CareerWise. Don't forget, if you'd like more information about any of the issues we've covered, you can check out our website, the address www.teachers.tv. You can even progress your own CPD. Thanks to all our guests, thanks to you for watching. See you again.